Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Michael Aswell of winning fights 'cause I spaz well, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you following UFC Return to the Apex, Kape versus Horiguchi 2, a card that was serviceable, I would say. Very little star power, couple of interesting fights on here, probably like two really interesting matchups in about 12 fights, but there were a couple of lads on here who outperformed expectations. Standard night of fights. The main event was solid. It was Manel Kape versus Kyoji Horiguchi, a rematch of their fight 7 years ago, which I talked about extensively on the Boycast. One of the things that interested me coming into this one was the cage size difference, because if you saw the Ulanbekov Horiguchi fight, Ulanbekov just stares at him while he dances around the biggest cage you've ever seen, because I don't think it was on a pay-per-view, I think it was just on a traveling event where they take the big cage. And then he fought Amir Albazi in the Apex, which is the small cage, and Amir Albazi's spine is fused. Like, he just lumbers around the ring after people, and he still cut the ring on Horiguchi, dropped him in the first round, was able to get some good entries on takedowns, and then Koji had to wrestle up from there. So I was quite intrigued, because I also just watched Manel Kape walk Brandon Royval to the fence and bang him out there with a good stepping right hook. Now, Brandon Royval is not a great ring general. His footwork is all over the place because he's just a wild man. But that did intrigue me in this matchup, because that's one of those small things that I could see making a big difference. It's not a small thing, it's like an extra 5 meters or whatever it is, across, that is, of the cage. But this was a weird fight, because I thought Kape had been looking so good that he'd look a lot better than he did, and then he looked pretty bad for most of the fight, and then he won it on one exchange in the third round, basically. It wasn't terrible. I mean, it was another one like Horiguchi Pettis, where Horiguchi looked great, and he just isn't great at absorbing damage, certainly not anymore. From the get-go, Horiguchi was standing orthodox and Kape was standing southpaw. They did both switch throughout the fight, but that was the general setup for most of the fight. And Horiguchi got to work throwing open side body kicks right off the bat with his right leg. Kape caught the first couple and really did threaten to come back in a dangerous way. And then Horiguchi gave it a rest and came back to it and wasn't getting the kicks caught as easily. It was quite early that Horiguchi jumped in, hit him with the right hand, and weaved out with the left hook in the way that he always used to in his first run in the UFC, and then stepped back, and Kape just followed him and said, right, no, exchange isn't done, mate, we're doing it again, and quite visibly hurt him in the next little scrappy exchange. So that was kind of your setup. Like, Horiguchi was faster, and he was beating Kape to the punch. He wasn't always the most accurate, I would say. Kape's head movement has improved quite a lot. But when Kape landed, Horiguchi tended to show it. Kape was looking for the shin kick quite a lot, which is it's a technique that is as dumb as it looks, but does work. It's just, you're looking at it going, well, if you're connecting with the same part of your shin on their shin, are you not going to experience discomfort doing that? And the answer is yes. And at several points in this fight, he connected with Horiguchi's shin lower on his foot and hurt himself. But for the most part, this was playing out in the center of the cage, and I would say a lot of it played out very similar to the first fight, because Kape was getting blasted up the center when he was stepping to kick. This is one of those things where Horiguchi is not countering what you're doing. He's not countering the specifics of the strike. He's countering the step, which is the secret of like intercepting counters and the point fighting karate stuff. It's the secret of looking like you are blisteringly fast, even when you're just quite fast. You give ground and retreat and draw the guy forward, and then when he starts taking what we call the extra step, which is a big step, and then throws his technique because he knows you're going to back off, you can change direction, step in to meet him, and by both of you stepping forward before he throws the strike, you end up almost on top of him in half the time, looking very, very quick, and hitting him while he's committing to a strike. And this is the same for Horiguchi in the flyweight division, where everyone's blisteringly fast, as it was for Lyoto Machida up in the light heavyweight and middleweight divisions, where everyone's not as fast, but he did look really, really fast because he timed people stepping towards him. I would say that Horiguchi is a great deal more aggressive than Lyoto Machida, though. Lyoto Machida would wait to the point of everyone booing him to get the guy coming at him, whereas Horiguchi is doing work, circling off, and trying to get you to step onto him in that time. So one really interesting thing in this fight was, well, firstly, Kape was stepping to kick. So whether he was going for a body kick or he was going for the inside shin kick, he got to the point where he would like take a big step and then kick because he knew Horiguchi was going to move backwards, and then Horiguchi would jump up the center with a jab or a left hook or a right straight and hit him. And if you remember from the first fight, like, he got sent flying through the air a couple of times because he got hit on one leg chasing Horiguchi. But throughout the fight, I felt like Kape was having most success not feinting his punches, which he was doing a lot, but when he faked stepping forward and then didn't, and then Horiguchi would swing at the air. And I think if he'd done a bit more of that, false entries, fake stepping in, and then step in as Horiguchi's out of position, that could have really helped him. He was doing a lot of feinting with his hands. He's looking particularly for, he's going southpaw, and he's looking for a poking left straight to step through and throw a right hand from orthodox. The sort of Dustin Poirier shift thing. He does a lot of this. He did it against Brandon Royval, where he was standing orthodox and he'd poke his right hand and then step through and throw a right hook having got to southpaw. Basically, he's quite a one-handed puncher. Everything he does is in service of landing that right hand. But yes, when Kape was following him around the cage, he looked pretty bad, which was surprising because I thought Kape's pressure had looked very good lately against Almabayev and Brandon Royval. You did see Horiguchi using his reactive shots to break off the action, which I thought was... It was important in the first fight because he was midway through a tournament and he was doing a lot more wrestling in that tournament. Firstly, because he'd done a load of work with ATT, but secondly, because 3 15-minute fights entirely taken on the feet, it's going to take it out of you. You're going to get kicked and punched and hurt. Whereas if you can get on top of the guy, he can't really do much damage to you in the moments when you're on top of him. But yes, he was using that to break off Kape coming back at him, especially because Kape was taking punches and then would chase Horiguchi back. And to everyone's horror, because that's not the right thing to do, it was working very well. So Horiguchi ducked in on a reactive double early on, and then Kape got up very promptly. And then he ducked in on a reactive high crotch at the end of the first round, and Kape used a guillotine. There was a big roll. Horiguchi ended on top. Second round, Horiguchi throws a lovely front kick. Kape chases him back, and then Horiguchi doesn't even fully level change, but Kape sprawls at thin air. So the purpose of the reactive double was taking an effect, which is he should be worried that I'm going to take him down anytime he starts to open up with his hands. Kape followed him around for much of the second round, and then he stepped in to throw a low kick, and Horiguchi stepped in at the same time, pushed him in the face, grabbed the leg, and just bundled him over. Effortless because he timed him. He ended up in the top of half guard, and he did nothing. I was watching people's reaction to this fight where they were like, Kyoji was fighting perfectly. I was like, I could have done with a bit less holding top position and not doing anything. But I think that's a credit to how active Kape was at least making Horiguchi feel like he was. He was holding the free hand constantly, not letting him hit, and he was constantly trying to get his knee back inside to do the inside knee escape, which he then did, back to closed guard. Kape was definitely landing the better strikes from the bottom with his elbows. And then third round, they get into it, they mix it up in the early going. Kape dings him a couple of times, and then Kape switches to orthodox quite subtly as he's following. Horiguchi jumps in with his 1-2. Kape ducks down to the outside of the jab and comes back with the old Roberto Duran outside slip counter, right hand across the top, stuns Horiguchi, puts him on his, puts him to all fours, gets behind him and hits him with the under the armpit shot that we're always talking about. How Dan Hendo put out Fedor, how Justin Gaethje's always looking to hurt people, punching under the armpit where they can't see it coming, and it hits him straight under the jaw, and that put Kyoji out, and that was the win for Manel Kape. It was it was a good win. It just wasn't a particularly inspiring performance up to that point. But then he was fighting one of the most technically skilled fighters in that division. But again, he's going to fight Joshua Van now, and Joshua Van's a completely different sort of fighter. So that will be fantastic if that matchup happens. Lots of discussion of Manel Kape's tits, which are pretty spectacular. They're not the worst I've seen in MMA. Shamil Musayev of PFL, it's unbelievable amounts of gyno, which happened well after he started his pro career. You can just see him suddenly grow tits one day. But it's a professional sport. It'll happen. Can't be squeamish. Can't write to the censor and demand that they blur his tits. So, next for both, I think pretty obviously, Manel Kape's going to get Joshua Van, which I think is a fantastically interesting fight because Manel Kape loves being on the front foot. Joshua Van loves being on the front foot and does so by poking that jab in people's face and counter-fighting if they stand still, or, offensive counter-punching. Kape, competent wrestling, solid wrestling even, but doesn't like to go to it, where it's seen as sort of Joshua Van's area of weakness, or at least experience. Van, not a phenomenal hitter. Manel Kape, very obviously one of the better hitters at this weight. But Van also ridiculously accurate, and the pressure he drives is remarkable too. I'm trying to remember the last time I saw Kape in a long fight. He went 15 minutes with Makayev. Been booked for main events a couple of times at the Apex, but never got the full 5 rounds in. I always finished the guy early, which is great, but also not getting the experience in those longer contests. Meanwhile, for Horiguchi, I think he's going to be a threat for a while. This is the biggest hitter in the division, and it was a fantastic counterpunch. It was a fantastic switch of stance and read and gamble to go for it. He just smashed Amir Albazi, who is top 10. Well, he shouldn't be, but that's the state of the top 10 right now. Brandon Moreno's still hanging around. I think Horiguchi not being as durable as he once was probably not going to decimate his ability to run up some wins in this division. I would say avoid someone like Loney Kavanagh, who's extremely fast and explosive. Maybe fight someone like... Well, you probably don't want to do Tatsuro Taira because of the doubling up of Japanese prospects there. Well, not prospects, but Japanese ranked contenders. But a nice grappler, a nice slow-paced grappler for Horiguchi might be nice. Or he beat up Ulanbekov. You could see... you could give him Tim Elliott, but then Tim Elliott's so weird and constantly forward moving that it could be one of those fights where you go, oh my god, Tim Elliott's making him look bad. Ursig, maybe? That'd be a fun fight because you've got a couple of really technically skilled guys who probably deserve a break from getting domed by heavy hitters. Or you could go Kyoji versus Almabayev so that Horiguchi can size mog someone for once. It's crazy to think this dude was competing at bantamweight for the best part of a decade, because he's small even at flyweight. In terms of our usual what would you do differently, how does Horiguchi win this fight, it's kind of hard to do when it was he was doing well and then he ate a really good counterpunch. I did think he looked a bit inaccurate at times, which is obviously partly Manel Kape's head movement, but it also hammered home that Horiguchi wasn't, aside from kicks, he wasn't going to the body much. Granted, if you've got a good kicking game and you're worried about the guy counterpunching, there's not an awful lot of need. It's not really an in and out sort of fighting style to go, to throw punches to the body. He might have felt like he pressed his luck too much with the kicks to the body already because a couple of them were getting caught. He usually relies on the calf kick a lot more, but firstly, open stance matchup for the most part, but secondly, Kape was doing a good job of taking his lead foot away whenever Horiguchi stepped in to kick. Which is what everyone should be doing. Stop trying to check low kicks. Just pull your foot back. It's so much easier. It's what Garn was doing against Alex Pereira. And I hope Yuri Prochaska was watching at home going, what? You're allowed to do that? He was probably watching and going, that's not very Bushido. But I do think for Horiguchi, it was probably getting certainly in that third round, once Kape had started some scrappier trades, it was probably getting a little bit too fixated on headhunting and also just output. He really upped his pace in that third round. And you're like, well, you've done well in the first two. Maybe keep it exactly the way it's been so far. But then that was a positive on Kape. He made the fight more scrappy and won out as a result. Co-main was Navajo Stirling versus Ion Cutelaba. I'll be honest, I quite like Navajo Stirling, and this was a fight that made me like him more. I thought he looked good. Ion Cutelaba, not a co-main event quality fighter, even in the Apex, to be honest. I think this guy is... He's there as an action fighter, but he's always been the world's biggest front runner. And a lot of his action comes before the fight too. It's I'm going to paint myself green and scream at you at the press conference. I'm going to mean mug you during the introductions. I'm going to threaten to jump you during the introductions. And then after the first round, he's pretty useless. He did used to have a habit of getting horribly finished though. I did 3 in a row where he got finished in 2022. Ankalaev obviously finished him twice. I know people don't want to count the first one, but he did. Serkinov finished him back in the day. He was a glass cannon, or not glass, but he was a pretty shoddily made cannon. And he's actually done pretty well avoiding that lately. He hasn't been finished since that awful streak in 2022. He just beat Umar Sy, who I think he was undefeated at the time, wasn't he? Coming off making another season of Lupin. Oh no, he'd lost to Alonzo Manyfield already, so we'd already lost the sheen on him. But Cutelaba had been looking better. And he came out for this one, running overhand, shifting through on every punch, pushes Navajo Stirling to the fence, gets turned around, grabs the arm in guillotine standing against a guy who's taller than him, which is quite a feat. Ended up pulling guard, rolling him through. He was threatening this arm in guillotine throughout the fight. He just finished, he finished Sy with a guillotine. I think that's the only guillotine finish on his record. But he seems to be very confident in it. And he kept hitting this gorgeous Haragoshi whizzer throw, step across throw, where you step across both legs and throw them with his back to the fence. He hit it off a body lock later on, which is something that I'm seeing a bit more nowadays. It was, you don't normally see the big, I could keep calling them whizzer throws because people hit them off whizzers all the time, but those big judo throws were either uchimata, which is inside thigh throw, or haragoshi, which is where you step all the way across. You don't typically see them off body locks where the guy's got his arms locked around the guy. And Shavkat Rakhmonov does them quite a lot. Shavkat Rakhmonov is really good at locking his hands around guys in the clinch from an over-under clinch and then beating them up with knees and throwing them to the floor. That's really like his special skill. And then just the other night, Ilia Topuria, I think that was that a haragoshi, taitoshi, whatever it was, but he did a nice throw with the body lock against Justin Gaethje. I think that was in the last round. And then here, Cutelaba hit it several times against Navajo Stirling. He was doing all kinds of funky judo stuff, actually. He got pushed to the fence by Stirling, and he used his shin to frame across him, like you do in Muay Thai, to stop people from elbowing you or kneeing you. We were talking about that a lot in the Jaransuk article I just did, because we don't get to talk about it a lot in MMA. But if you frame on the guy with your knee, you can start pummeling out with your hands. It's something Daryl Christian talks about a lot. Navajo Stirling grabbed it like a single leg, stepped in and turned Cutelaba so he had to hop, and then tried to kick out the leg that he was hopping on. And Cutelaba hopped free and then dropped his other foot onto the outside of the knee of Stirling and tried to hit him with a Hizaguruma, a knee wheel, which is, you don't see a lot of those in MMA, which is kind of like a Sasai Surikomiyashi. I mean, it's more where the foot is. I'm sure there's loads of details if you're good at judo, but for our no-gi grappling purposes, yeah, it's just a Sasai but higher. But the great thing about that haragoshi is that every time he hit it, he conceded the underhook as he landed from the throw, and then Stirling would come up on the underhook and turn into Cutelaba, and Cutelaba would grab his head and arm and try and guillotine him. But Navajo Stirling, discipline on the ground was sensational in this one. He did a couple of beautiful knee slide stand-ups along the fence. Or sometimes, I think they call it a knee pound in wrestling sometimes too, but if you have one leg up and one knee down along the fence, you want to make a bit of distance and you want to put your back pressure into the guy. You want to lean back into him as you stand up. Him being behind you, this is. So you take a little step with the foot that's up, and then you slide the knee that's down up behind it to make a little bit of distance, and then you stand up, putting back pressure into them. Lovely stuff. I've always liked this off the Kimura grip, Sakuraba style. Outside leg stand up off the, while you're threatening Kimura at the same time. And in fact, Ion Cutelaba almost did a Sakuraba style standing Kimura turning back into Navajo Stirling in this fight. And then did the haragoshi with the Kimura grip, which was crazy. But those stand-ups by Stirling were fantastic, just good technical stand-ups, and then he'd break the hands apart and turn back into him. Because that's MMA. If you are good enough at turning to your knees, standing up, and breaking the hands apart, the other guy has to put a ton of effort into getting you down. And the story of Ion Cutelaba's career has been front-loading all that effort and then fading. And then on the feet, Cutelaba always dangerous in the first round, but useless as he slows down. Whereas Stirling, just pretty sensible, basic, fundamental stuff applied well throughout the fight. Nice long jab, good 1-2s, kept getting into the body with that left hook to the body, and he kept kiting Ion Cutelaba around the ring, leading him around the ring, and then stepping in to meet him, intercept him with a left hook to the body. Really took it out of him. Left knee to the body as well, switch left knee or step left knee. And one of those at the end winded Cutelaba as he grabbed hold of him, did a takedown, fell into bottom position, and then just sat against the cage because obviously he'd been pretty badly hurt by the knee and then got pounded out while sitting against the cage. But I was impressed by Navajo Stirling as a prospect, just any solid, talented guy at this weight. I said it on the boycast, but you offer me a solid, talented guy who's pretty coachable at light heavyweight, I'll bite your hand off. Because look how far someone like Magomed Ankalaev got. I mean, yes, he can hit really well, and he's a good boxer, but basically it comes down to him having light heavyweight traits that all the light heavyweights have, plus composure and being pretty coachable. Being able to do basics and not just spazzing out, and not fading after a round and a half of good work. With that said, I was quite impressed by Ion Cutelaba here as a big Ion Cutelaba hater. When I see him on the card, I'm like, I mean, it'd be fun, but it'll be stupid. I thought he was pretty good here. It was still tinged with a lot of stupid, but he was dangerous. He was pretty effective with his offensive grappling. He was pretty effective when he was defensive grappling because Stirling would, counter his fence work by turning him onto the fence. His striking let him down, as it often does, but I think he's improving in a way that won't win him any titles, but is still better than what he was. And he's only 32. He could go up to heavyweight and be here for another 15 years. So how would you have won it as Ion Cutelaba I don't know if I can do this particularly well because I would say use that top control more effectively. Don't jump guard on things. Don't lumber around the cage following him onto knees and so on. But we're talking about a guy who doesn't really have the toolkit to do things that aren't that. His thing is being a Hulk and just going out and smashing. What's next for both of them? Navajo, Stirling. I mean, Tapology has him at number 15 now. There aren't that many exciting prospects at light heavyweight, and no one even knows the light heavyweight champion. So who's in that top 15? Manyfield's at number 15 currently in the official rankings, and he is not very good. Nikita Krylov's there, who is, again, a very flawed fighter, but probably a good test for someone like Stirling. Maybe Özdemir, who is thoroughly washed, but still very skilled for a light heavyweight. Or you could put him in, for a difficult task, something like Mirzakhanov, Roundtree. Man, what the hell are these rankings? You got Carlos Ulberg, Magomed Ankalaev, fair enough, but where is he? Yuri Prochazka, because no one else is winning any fights. Jan Blachowicz, who, where the fuck is Jan? Did Jan fight recently? No, he's having a rematch with Guskov of their draw a half year later. Okay, if I'm Guskov, I probably regret agreeing to rematch that. It's just taking time out of your career. He's draining your life. Roundtree, who basically climbed these rankings by everyone being so bad. Jamal Hill. And then Paulo Costa jumped in at 7 because he managed to find the one southpaw he could fight in these top 10 rankings. Dominic Reyes. No, give him Dominic Reyes because Reyes could still knock him out if he's not really sharp. But Reyes also will implode if he hits his chin. Johnny Walker, number 13. What on earth? I've never seen a more dead division in my life, and I'm scrolling past women's bantamweight right now. Next for Ion Cutelaba, I don't know, another pay-per-view main card. Christian Rodriguez versus Hyder Amil. When I said there's 2 good fights on this card, these were the ones I was thinking about. The main event in this one, it was a little bit extreme because I was quite interested in Vinicius Oliveira versus Andre Fili, but Christian Rodriguez, the prospect killer, Hyder Amil, the recently killed prospect. Given that Rodriguez has done a lot of his work being grindy and doing some wrestling against some of these undefeated prospects, it was nice to see him working his striking very effectively here. Amil was fighting southpaw, Rodriguez was orthodox. Amil was obsessed with the step-up outside low kick. He wasn't having an awful lot of success with it, wasn't really leading into anything. First time he threw his left straight, Rodriguez threw a right hand across the top. Looked like it really hurt, but then Rodriguez tried to move to the clinch, and Amil hit him with a great knee and separated the clinch. So they were looking pretty evenly matched to start with. One of the things that really I did love in this fight was when Amil threw the left kick above the waist, as you do as a southpaw. Rodriguez took it or blocked it, and then parried it across his body, and then came back with combinations. So I think it was a right straight left hook was most common. Great example of this is Masvidal versus Cerrone. But it should be instinct for everyone to parry the kick across your body, come back with a couple of punches and maybe a high kick. And Christian Rodriguez was doing great work with that in this fight. You do have to be careful in MMA, though, because everyone in MMA knows that if you miss a kick or you have a kick parried, you should be spinning. And if your opponent jumps in immediately after you've missed a kick or they parried it across themselves, they can get, it's a really easy opportunity to hurt them. Loads of examples. Was that Zhang versus Jacek 2? Think of every spinning back fist you've ever seen land. And you can mitigate that somewhat if you throw the guy's foot towards the floor next to you. Makes it very hard for him to spin because he has to move towards you. If you throw it round, he will just carry on and spin with it. And then Rodriguez established his takedown threat really well too. Won a couple of exchanges on the feet. Amil begins to open up. Ducks under and says, "Oh, don't let your elbows come away from your body, mate. I'm going to take you down." Didn't complete the takedown. Amil used the fence really well. But it had done its job, or it looked like it had. They got into an exchange, and Christian Rodriguez ended with a high kick, which was great. Hurt him. Amil came up into the Buddha fist guillotine. Not much you can do after that. It's a bit tricky to get out of. The Buddha fist guillotine, or the Cody McKenzie-tine, is where your forearm is not across the front of their throat. You have the front of their throat in the V of your elbow, so that your bicep and your forearm are cutting off the carotids on both sides of the head, on both sides of the neck. And those are the chokes that very quickly put people to sleep. So Charles Jourdain is fantastic at that. And if you get your hands locked in right and you're pushing up on the fist, everything's snug in, it's very hard for the guy to break it by... It's very hard for the guy to take pressure off by passing your guard or whatever. You stay there. Like Cody McKenzie finished people from bottom side control. Not like he wrapped their head from bottom side control, but he wrapped their head, got the choke in, and then they passed his guard, and he was just like, doesn't matter, you're going to sleep. According to Tapology, this takes Rodriguez up to 29 at featherweight and drops Amil down to 68. God, brutal. Because Amil was a pretty hot prospect there for a minute. And then he met Jose Delgado, got domed with that beautiful left hook into knee, caught him ducking. And since then, he's just not looked the same. Or he's looked, he didn't look bad in this fight. Christian Rodriguez looked better. So Rodriguez at 29, I mean, obviously probably not getting a ranked opponent next, but let's have a quick look at the rankings and see who I'd like him against. Well, this is the thing. You've got some ghosts floating around the rankings too. You've got Josh Emmett at number 15. Still very dangerous, probably, for anyone but the very best guys. But then equally, like, you've got Melky Costa at 13, Aaron Pico at 12. Those are really dangerous guys. And then above them, Brian Ortega at 11. What the fuck is Brian Ortega doing ranked? And then Steve Garcia, Kevin Valajos, Yusuf Zalal. Real fighters or real current competitors. So for anyone who was looking at trying to break into the featherweight rankings, I'd say Josh Emmett and Brian Ortega. Get after it, because they're not going to be ranked for much longer, and you get a freebie. David Onama's at 14, and he's a very hit and miss fighter. Like his problem his entire career has been he doesn't start in round 1, he gives up round 1, and then sometimes he doesn't even do enough in rounds 2 and 3 to win those rounds decisively. So very winnable fight for Rodriguez. What else was on the card? Murtazali Magomedov versus Melsik Bagdasarian. This was a very quick fight, but it just demonstrates something cool. On my YouTube, there is a video called Slacky's Film Room, the Japanese/Scottish Twister, and we talked about this briefly. Almost every fight in Japan now ends this way. It's such a strong setup, and it works particularly well in MMA, because the thing I talk about every week, where back position is not the best in MMA because the guy will put you on your back while you're on his back, so that you don't have any effective strikes, and then he'll pull your arm across or start turning into you. Basically, any way that he can turn back into you and end up in your closed guard. Well, one clever counter that people came up with, particularly in Japan, for this was to use the inside body triangle, which is a body triangle of the legs, but you let it slip round to the side so that the leg that's hanging free is between their legs, and you allow them to turn up into you. And then you put their head under your armpit in the style of a twister, and you deadlift your hips into their spine and threaten to break their back. It's a very strong submission, and it works very well because every MMA fighter in the world is trained to get on top once they've given up their back. And the best example of how well this works is that Anthony Pettis was one of the best guys in the world, specifically at letting the opponent have his back and then turning back into them. He did it to, I think he did it to Benson Henderson, but he did it to Charles Oliveira like 5 times in their fight. Go check that out. He exhausts Charles Oliveira by giving up his back and then turning into Charles Oliveira. And he fought Stevie Ray in PFL when both were very long in the tooth, but Stevie Ray put in the inside body triangle. Pettis did exactly what he normally does, whipped the choking arm over his head and started turning into Stevie Ray, and then Stevie Ray arched his back and made Pettis tap. And then Jake Hadley scored one in PFL as well. But they happen in Japan all the time, and if you watch Tatsura Taira, he does a ton of stuff from the inside body triangle on the back. It's a very popular attack in Japanese MMA gyms at the moment. But they call it the Scottish Twister because Stevie Ray from Scotland has scored 2 of them in his professional career. So there wasn't an awful lot to say about this fight. I did like that Bagdasarian came out and used the twist kick with his lead foot. He's a southpaw. Magomedov was standing orthodox. You pick up your lead leg, you throw a front kick, but you twist it out slightly, so it's harder to catch. Lovely kick. Seeing it used lots. Cyril Gane, big pioneer of it in MMA. Imavov also does it. Very long shot to try and grab the leg from Magomedov. Runs him back towards the fence. Easy trip into the turtle, gets the back, and then he basically let Bagdasarian turn up into him because it's the most common reaction, and it sets up this very strong submission. And then afterwards, he said that Askar Askarov taught him it, and Kapoza said that Askar Askarov's the first person he saw using it, so good chance he was the first person using it in MMA. What's next for Murtazali Magomedov? I mean, he's undefeated. He's fought his way through largely unknown regional promotions. Knocked out a guy on the Contender Series and submitted a guy here, so, both in the first round. Looking great. I wouldn't rush him. He's only 26. It's featherweight. have him fight Hyder Amil if Hyder Amil's having the horrible fall off that he looks like he's having. And for Bagdasarian, he took a year off after that John Silver loss, had a fight booked but was injured. And before that John Silver loss, he had like 3 fights cancelled as well, 2 due to him being injured. So he might just be one of those fighters because he's not particularly old. 34. It's on the top end of what you're, of winning a title in that division probably, and except Volkanovski's setting new records every day. But body probably shouldn't be falling apart this badly at this stage. It's tough because do you say take some time, make sure everything's working okay, or do you say it's probably better to just eat that loss and try and get back in as quickly as you can while you're not severely injured? But he's not a bad fighter. When before that John Silver fight, I was watching all his bouts, and it did look like he was being set up a little bit, particularly another southpaw for John Silver, who was on a streak of knocking out southpaws. But he has his moments. He's not, he's not a bum by any means. Vinicius Oliveira versus Andre Fili. I really enjoyed this fight. I sort of overlooked it in previewing the event, but real craft meets chaos sort of fight. But I thought that I always think that Oliveira's striking is very interesting because he gets down behind his lead shoulder and sways away from the guy while extending his lead arm and then coming back. Like it looks like he's going, why I oughta, with his rear hand, but he is getting down behind his lead shoulder and taking his head offline. The great Jimmy Wild, the ghost with the hammer in his hand, the mighty atom. He was was it flyweight or a minimum weight? But he's a Welsh boxer in the 20s and 30s. And Ring Magazine has him at like number 10 in their list of all-time punchers, but if you read his books or watch his fights, he was obsessed with just swaying back and then coming back with right hands. And I like the way Oliveira does it. He started walking Fili down early and he immediately got to work on the calf kicks, which I thought was a solid plan because Fili likes to extend into his jab. He has quite a long stance to begin with. And he spends a lot of the time in fights doing things like that little dart across himself where he changes stances while stepping out to the side of the opponent. And if you can catch him while his legs are busy doing stuff like that, it's probably going to jar his knee and hurt him, which will then prevent him from doing that stuff in the future. But Oliveira promptly hurt his own foot doing this, throwing these kicks at the calf. Another look that I like from Oliveira is that he throws the front kick to the body with his rear leg, and he says, I'm stepping in. Like, he always shifts forward into the opposite stance after throwing the front kick and then starts swinging from his opposite side. Or, if he gets it caught, he turns his knee down, puts his lead hand out, and does the sway back thing, but on one leg. Which is really cool. I've seen guys hurt their ACL by turning their foot down in a kick like that, but it's just like because it's uncontrolled. That is a legitimate way to deal with someone catching your foot. It was just cool to see him like completely disregard having his foot caught and going, no, I'm still doing my swinging stuff. So what I was looking for early on was I wanted Andre Fili to use the high kick or abuse the high kick, just throw it as much as possible, like Ian Gary against Carlos Prates, where it's like, the idea isn't that I'm going to knock you out. The idea is that every time you do the thing you like doing, you are at risk. So hopefully it will cut into the way you fight and make you a bit more defensive and give me more chances to open up. And he did it a few times, but he sort of got away from it. And I get like throwing lots of high kicks is a lot of effort, but I just like the idea of popping the jab and throwing the left high kick, or from open stance throwing your rear straight and then the rear leg high kick off that. Because Oliveira is always, his answer is every time to dip down to the side. You don't need to catch him and knock him unconscious. You just need to say, stop doing that. And then if he stops, he's going to be really easy to hit because that's the thing he does all the time. He's having to actively fight his instincts while fighting you. Loads of examples of this in MMA. People like Ross Pearson and KJ Noons love dipping under punches, slipping punches. And as soon as you throw a few low high kicks, so body kicks that would turn into high kicks if they ducked into them, or some knees, they start standing up and they're not nearly as hard to hit. Because it's not like they've elevated their parrying and distance game to the same level as the thing they like to do every day. But Fili did then go to the body kick on the open side and really hurt Oliveira. And he did the Marab thing where he was so hurt he actively screamed, which was crazy. And after that, Oliveira goes into this weird thing where he's trying to walk forward, put his lead arm out and lean back, as he is all the time in all his fights. Very strange to watch. Reminds me of what they used to say about Jim Jeffries. Like he'd come in behind like his lead shoulder, like sidestepping into you. But he was trying to also cross-check with his lead leg at the same time. Very strange to watch. But fair play to him, he rallied and tried to get a takedown in the last seconds of that first round. Second round came out, immediately catches the kick and rushes Fili to the fence. What I really like, a punch that Oliveira has, is this sort of straight uppercut, where he throws his uppercut, but not from underneath you, but rising towards you. And he throws that down the inside of Fili's jab a few times, and it really does fuck Fili up. And Fili starts standing to the fence too much. In the first round, I was surprised that Fili was able to put Oliveira on the fence so much, but in the second round, Oliveira starts pushing Fili back to the fence. And then he gets to work, coming in behind swings and then digging to the body. For someone who fights like a caveman, there's a little bit of science there that's really nice. Like, he was doing attritive work with his low kicks from early on, and then he's doing attritive work with his body work as soon as he can get Fili to the fence. And he got Fili to the fence by threat of being a madman swinging punches at his head. And then once Fili was at the fence, he'd started doing something a lot more sinister, which is like, here's a big swing, and then there's some to the body as well. And then he just wore Fili down with his body work and big punches, and a lovely calf kick into a 1-2, which was gorgeous. Hurt his foot again in the process, but he had him ready to knock out, and then he started doing these 12-6 elbows standing, but on the back of the head. I was just like, what? After all the stuff that happened last week? But, fair enough. Manel Kape managed to make it through the entire main event without getting a point docked. He didn't cheat. Lima cheated loads and didn't get a point docked. Normally, after a big scandal like that, where Herb Dean has to come out and say, here's why I'm always right, and I will never be taking any accountability for being wrong on anything ever. Normally, after that, the refs come out and they deduct a point in the first foul of the first high-profile fight that happens after it. But no point deductions. Were there any on this card at all? I can't remember. I don't think so. Should have deducted a point from Andre Lima for just fighting the dumbest fight I've ever seen. But anyway, yeah, finishes Oliveira. Weird downward elbows to the back of the head. Cut the back of Fili's head open. And, Fili could appeal that, but chances are low that a athletic commission ever takes responsibility for a mistake. I just thought it was really sad because I thought Vinicius Oliveira was doing brilliant work in that fight. It would have been cool to see him throw some standing elbows. But why did you do them only when the guy was sort of bent forward and you could hit him in the back of the head? But this is the thing. Like last week, there were guys bending over backwards to explain why it's not back of the head, and back of the head doesn't count if the guy's moving and stuff like that. It's like, just say that back of the head isn't real. Just say that it isn't real. Because like the whole point, the reason it was brought into boxing as the first rule is that it was killing people. And in MMA, people just want an excuse for why. They'll give you like 8 reasons why that particular strike to the back of the head doesn't count. And was legal anyway. Borjas versus Lima was cool in that the biggest underdog on the card won, with his back to the wall, ready to be cut. And that's the second time he's won a fight when he was about to be cut. But it was also lame in that the fight was just dreadful to watch. Lima walked him down the whole time, poking in one front kick, one calf kick, one jab, and Borjas would come back with 3 punches, 3 slappy, wavy, inflatable man arm punches, but he did it every time. And Andre Lima seemed like completely confident that he was winning, while everyone else was going, I don't like that he's attempting 3 for every one you land. And there was some fence grabbing by Lima and some other stuff. He's a bit of a dirty fighter. He got bit, so everyone forgets, but he does like a foul. Yeah, I wasn't blown. Great work by Borjas to shut up the haters or whatever, but it was just him jogging around with his back to the fence and then coming off with combinations after Andre Lima inexplicably threw one thing and then stopped. Who am I going to have a moan about later? Oh, Mitch Raposo. We're going to talk about first and third. But, yeah, very frustrating. And this is one of those fights where I don't know what was up with Andre Lima. Either, maybe he was confident that because he was moving forward the whole time and he wasn't getting hurt by Borjas, that he was winning. But when someone fights like that, when they look like they're in control and they just don't push their advantages at all in terms of, like, throwing punches and hurting the guy, it always makes you suspect an injury or fatigue setting on too early, like a really bad weight cut or something like that. But a truly bizarre performance that he deserved to lose. And what a strange way to lose your undefeated record. Won't bother doing what's next for either, because, how do you win that one if you're Andre Lima? You do more. It's not hard. I think his corner was saying that. It's not hard to see that even in a close fight, do more. More than that, like, the whole purpose of getting someone by the fence is to unload your big guns because you've removed their retreat. The purpose of putting someone on the fence is not to land your point scorers. Your point scorers are for out in the open. Bia Mesquita versus Melissa Mullins, very funny. Pretty rubbish fight to start with, but Bia Mesquita comes in with 1-2 and then tries to do that lady thing like Karolina Kowalkiewicz used to do, or just inexperienced striker thing, really. You throw your 1-2 and then you try and recoil your right hand to throw it again. And as she did so, Melissa Mullins threw a 1-2-3 at the same time, stunned her with the left hook, Bea Mesquita did effectively pull her into a clinch quite well, and Melissa Mullins hit a throw, which has been very divisive on the internet because why would you do a throw when you don't want to take the person down? Attempting a nice throw can get people to let go of you, but she ended up on top and she wasn't able to disengage. And then Bea Mesquita got back to her full guard and climbed her legs up to get over the shoulders, and then she turned into an armbar. It was nice, but it was not a good showing for Bea Mesquita when she had been looking like the unbeatable force in that division. And she took this fight like the fight made no sense rankings wise or like career progression wise because Melissa Mullins had just lost already. So she's coming off a loss to fight an undefeated fighter who most sites rank higher than her already. So yeah, just one that makes your prospect look bad, to be honest. But equally, it could be a learning experience for Bea Mesquita. That's why you always close the door on your combinations or weave your head or do something. You don't just throw your right hand and then pull it back. How would you win it if you're Melissa Mullins? It's hard because, like, I say, get up. But if you just stand up over someone who's very, very good, you often leave one leg exposed and they try and turn over on that. You got to try and get out safely. And I think she did by once Mesquita was back in closed guard, she was trying to stay contained. But that climbing armbar is strong. Go watch Bea Mesquita's matches with Fionn Davis where they exchanged wins by armbar and breaking each other's arms. Mitch Raposo versus Alan Nascimento. This was a very frustrating fight. There were a couple of really frustrating fights on this card. I think everyone agrees with me that this was frustrating. Because Mitch Raposo, very good at getting in, scoring a point, and leaving without getting hit. The problem is that he never goes any further. He never pushes his advantage, and he never changes the rhythm of that. Meanwhile, Alan Nascimento just followed him around the cage, doing largely bad things. Like, if a guy is running away from you using lots of lateral movement, the oblique kick, chassé basse, whatever you want to call it, the oblique kick to the lead leg, is not going to help you in any way. That is a move for jamming them when they're coming straight at you. Doesn't help you when the target, their leg, is moving all over the place to your left and your right. And Nascimento got cracked off that a couple of times, but he still kept doing it. And Nascimento's shots along the fence were dreadful. I get that he's way taller than Raposo, but he get him in position to shoot. Like, he got him in good ring position. He recognized that this is the time to start wrestling. And then he'd do a big long lunge, and Raposo would grab an underhook and pull him up because he had so much space and time to do it. Or he started landing the uppercut to the face and chest as Nascimento ducked in, and then he'd pull him up, or he'd use the whizzer to throw him off in the other direction. It was just very telegraphed by Nascimento. If you're going to do a big telegraphed entrance, don't do it like diving for the guy's hips. Just duck in a little and hit him in the chest with your chest, and then start trying to wrestle from there. Or get chest to chest and then start trying to work your way down. We were just talking about Fares Ziam, great as a tall guy, gets upper body clinches on people and then sags on their elbows to work his way down and lock his hands between their legs. So what would you do if you wanted to win as Nascimento? Well, he kept cornering him, or he kept getting him to the fence and then using like completely the wrong weapons, trying to jab him. Literally the same shit we were talking about with Lima, trying to jab him, front kicking, oblique kick him. Like, that's your time to go, right, high kick into swinging punch flurry. Throw a 1-2 and then dig to the body. This is the time to unleash the things that you think you can really fuck the guy up with. And then for Mitch Raposo, how do you do better in this fight? Because he always Mr. Split Decisions. He's winning and losing split decisions. You go first and third sometimes because he gets off a punch and he leaves. Or he gets off a flurry that may or may not connect, may or may not hurt the guy, and then leaves. You need to finish people or hurt people, you need to be able to throw punches, let them come back at you, so move your head but not in the running away sense, and throw punches back. Because that's when they're open and that's when they're vulnerable. You can poke guys all day from outside, and unless you sit down and throw hard punches, you're not going to hurt them just on basically on the lead as they follow you. You got to step in and commit, and you got to make one exchange into the next. This was the same exchange happening over and over again for a whole fight. And speaking of which, Gaston Bolaños versus Michael Aswell was as well. I thought that was very Rock'em Sock'em Robots fights. There were interesting things like Bolaños changed to southpaw to land body kicks, and Aswell started having success with the uppercut in the third round. But this fight was very meatheady from the start, and Aswell really needs some power to start having some effect. A lot of these guys, someone asked Gillian Robertson, what they thought of me saying that I heard she doesn't do any strength and conditioning. She probably should. And she put a picture of her giving the finger on her Instagram when she was doing like a Q&A. But there's no substitute for power. If you can build it, you should. And if you can't, that's another problem. Just work around it. Then you can say, right, now I've got to be real smooth. But why be real smooth when you can blow someone's head smooth off with your punching power? I mean, there are great examples. They always say like great punchers are born, not made or whatever. But I can give you the example of Badder Harry, who was not a great puncher at all. Did some stuff, put on some beef. No tits though, so fair enough. Put on some beef, and suddenly he was taking people's heads off. Levan Chokali versus Leon Shabazian was dreadful. Shabazian didn't get started. I feel bad for him because they were like worst performance since Jubilee, worst UFC debut since Jubilee. But he came out, got on one leg. Chokali slapped it down at the floor and low kicked it when it landed and hurt him on the first low kick. And then Shabazian was like standing against the fence. And then what are you going to do? You got one hampered leg and you're already standing against the fence. Of course, the guy's going to come in with another hard low kick combination and a low kick. What Shabazian needs for his next fight is either to get going immediately so that he can shake off the nerves and stuff, or hopefully fight someone who starts a bit slower. Like just Chokali was a really bad matchup for him here because he clearly got a little bit starstruck or came out a bit slow and then immediately got hurt. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. It was a decent enough night of fights. We got the one in Baku coming up, which looks pretty good next week. Might be worth doing something on Manuel Torres because he's a pretty exciting young prospect. Scratch that, he's 31. He's pretty excited, middle-aged for MMA prospect. Amabaya versus Johnson. Oh, loads of my favourite comedy characters are here, though. Abbas Magomedov, Nursultan Ruzabuev, Oleksijuk. Yeah, it's fine. It's another 13-fight card where maybe 2 or 3 are interesting. But in the meantime, I'll probably do something on the Patreon. It's a heat wave here, so I can't do anything. Can't train, can't lift weights, can't run. Might be time to dig out an old boxer or maybe a nice current Nakmoy. But if you want to get my extra shit and my preview podcast, get in on the Patreon. I think we've got 150-something articles there now. So sign up for a month, read them all, and then unsub. And then I'll write 150 more. But yeah, sign up to Patreon, support the podcast, be a boy. And if you are a Patreon boy, I'll see you in the week. And if you aren't, I'll catch you next week. I'm your boy Jack Slack, having just one big titty bless.